Alright, so here's how I made the logo for my channel. So I'm going to be starting off with this wooden base. I'm just sanding the edges where it wasn't cut, very cleanly. And that way I'll get a smoother finish for when I'm painting later on. So here's the print I'll be using. I printed this on my SLA printer, my resin printer. And this is the Twilight Greatsword, and I'll leave a link below. So what I'm going to be doing here is removing all the supports, any of the sort of pock marks the supports leave, and then I'll be sanding the entire blade to make it transparent. So I'll be going up to like a 2500 grit finish, which is pretty wild, and it was really smooth after, and that's exactly what I'm going for here. So after I'm done sanding it, I'll be removing some of the pieces from the hilt, and that way I'll be able to sculpt in the details I want here. So I'm using some milliput, rolling it out, and then I'll be sort of making like a branch texture, and later on I'll be coming in with some needle files, some wood carving tools, and some sanding twigs to sort of give me that final shape. So the hilt of the sword I'm sort of trying to replicate here is made out of like the hilt is like a branch essentially, so, and then the blade is like a green fluorite. So that's what I'm going for here. So I'm taking off all the details once the milliput is cured, and sanding it to the shape I need, and then I'll be carving in some of those wood grain with the wood carving tools you see on the right hand side there. So once that was all sculpted in, I'm just going to be priming it with some surface primer from Vallejo. I'm doing this by hand just so I don't spray any onto the blade, and we can keep it transparent. For the base, I'm going to be using this air drying clay, and then this texture roller I 3D printed just to get the ground texture I need for this. So it's supposed to look like the sword was abandoned and sort of been sitting in this old sort of palace ruin for a long time. Roll it out and get the texture I need, and then I'm just putting it on the base and waiting for it to dry, and then I'll move forward to painting it. Once it dries, I'm just going to be hitting it with this sandy sort of white ivory color. I leave a mark there where I want to put the sword in later on, and I'm going to be using some pigments, some colored pigments to get some weathering that I need onto the piece. I lock in those pigments by spraying some isopropyl alcohol, just a 50% mix. And then I'm going to be coming in with another dry brush of that base color just to bring out those highest details again. And so it looks like all this pigment is in the recesses, like dirt over time kind of thing. And once I've done that dry brush, I'll be going in with some green pigment. This is sort of where the foliage is going to be going later on, just so that if there's any missed spots, you'll still see like the simulated moss sort of texture. So I did lose the footage of me actually painting the sword, so I'm just going in with my airbrush and some acrylic inks. These are sort of transparent inks, and that's how I get the look you'll see here. So it's still transparent, that's why we sanded it so much, and that acrylic ink will keep the transparency so light can shine through it. Which is exactly what I'm going for. So I glued it in place, and that's how it looked. And then I'll be painting the handle, so that's why we primed it earlier. So I'm just going in with like a light brown, and then I'm hitting it with like a black wash to sort of get all that texture that we sculpted in to show through. Then I'll be going on to what's called the unholy guacamole. So I'm mixing some lycan and some peat moss, and then I'll be using some foam flock from Woodland Scenics. I'm mixing that all together with some glue, and then I'm just applying that to the surface with a brush. So I've done this a lot in some of my older videos if you want to check those out. But this is a super easy technique to sort of get that simulated sort of vine growth or even any sort of foliage that you need. So while I'm doing that here, I'll talk a little bit about why I chose this as my logo and where it came from. So this is one of my first D&D characters. They are an arch-fae warlock, and so they get their powers through this sword, which is like a relic of that arch-fae. So it's so nerdy. The arch-fae is Relcath, which is like this giant tree ant, and so this sword is like a branch, so to speak, off of them. Yeah, never mind the pun there. And so having this grants the warlock the powers that they use. And so I really wanted like a giant greatsword type of anime character type of thing, and then the green fluorite to match the dice that I use for this character, because that's the type of person I am, I guess. So that's why I chose that. So you see here, I'm just applying it with a brush, use an old brush. I keep all my old wrecked brushes around for stuff like this. Now, as always, do keep in mind when this dries, it'll dry a little bit darker, but here's how it looked while it was drying. And then I'll be going in with a dry brush just to bring out the highest details on the handle. And here's how it turned out. So thanks a lot for checking out this video, guys. If you liked it, make sure you're hitting that thumbs up button. If you loved it, consider subscribing to the channel so you can see some of my new builds. And if you are subscribed, make sure you're hitting that bell so you're notified when my videos come out. Keep making.